You're all good? All good? Yep. Yep. Right. Well, got to say, I'm hardly surprised that the Greens have voted against a Senate inquiry into the decision to allow beef that originated from Mexico and South America via the United States into this country. We saw only yesterday Senator Gallagher and Senator Hanson-Young tell the Senate that they're running the show. And there's obviously a dirty deal being done between Labor and the Greens to vote against this. What are we voting against? We're voting against transparency of a decision where there has been suspicious behaviour by the Prime Minister in trading away the biosecurity of this country. When you have the Inspector General of Biosecurity in this country, an independent person that's been appointed by this government, that in March this year gave a recommendation to have a scientific advisory group overview decisions like this, that was accepted by the Minister and the government, to ignore that, to allow US beef that originated through South America and Canada, where there is still risks without the appropriate protocols in place for things like mad cow disease, tuberculosis being brought into this country. You've got to ask why. This is all because of a diplomatic failure by Prime Minister Albanese to be able to meet with President Trump. Let's call it for what it is. He hasn't been able to do that, and he's prepared to try and trade whatever he can to get that meeting with President Trump. Now, this isn't just about agricultural production in this country and protecting our national herd. This is about human health. Let me tell you, we do not want the human strain of mad cow disease in this country. We do not want to see the need to go back to a vaccination rate of having to keep Australians safe from tuberculosis. Why wouldn't we take the precautionary principle? This smells for what it is. This is a desperate attempt of a Prime Minister that has failed diplomatically to be able to see President Trump, and he's prepared to trade away the health of Australians in doing that. All we ask and have always called for is what the Inspector General of Biosecurity has said. Let's have an independent scientific panel overview this decision, and if all the right protocols are being put in place, that's from traceability, so that we know that cattle that came through Mexico actually did originate from Mexico, not from Nicaragua or any other countries through South America, that the ear tags and the traceability they have meets our requirements. Knowing around the withholding period that they must feed in the United States. Just simple technical questions that if they were confident in science, if they were confident in the process, then wouldn't you return confidence to our biosecurity system? And that just goes to show that this government has become desperate in their diplomatic failings. And I hope beyond hope, that we have not opened ourselves up here, not just from an agricultural perspective, but from a human health perspective. So happy to take questions. Well, how can you cut a deal with President Trump? You haven't met with him. I mean, we've had a procession of over 20 world leaders go through the White House. We've come nowhere near the White House. They're going through the front door while Australia's going out through the back door. If you want to know about how you're going to cut a deal with Trump, you actually have to sit down with him. And this isn't anything new. This has been going on for months about the trade issues that President Trump has put to the world. Other world leaders have found themselves the energy and enthusiasm to go to Washington and to sit down with President Trump. Our Prime Minister hasn't. And that's without overlaying the AUKUS review that I would have thought that when we've got Virgin pilots finding Chinese warships in our waters, we might need to have a strategic partnership. When the Prime Minister, who rightfully went to China, met with President Xi, I would have thought when President Xi made it very clear that he will send and have exercises anywhere, where he wants, when he wants, how he wants, that would have been a pretty big signal to the Prime Minister that it was a failure he hadn't met President Trump, but a priority does go and meet him to make sure that AUKUS and that strategic partnership remains to keep Australians safe, and we don't have that capacity ourselves at the moment. So this is a diplomatic failure, but when you overlay that with what they're doing in just cutting a deal on biosecurity, this is serious. This is human health we're putting at risk here, and I think the Australian people have every right to know that there is transparency in the biosecurity system. And that's not just me, that is someone independent, someone who the government has appointed as an independent Inspector General who gives advice about our biosecurity system, who has said that. And for that to be ignored, there is something not right about this. This smells, and the fact that the Greens are prepared to cut a deal with Anthony Albanese just goes to show they are running the show in the Senate. They are running it, and they've done a deal for something else. It'll come out. They've dealt this away to be able to get something else, but that puts us all at risk. Sadly, that's the circumstance that the Australian democracy's got to. Well, they're making assumptions because they haven't met with anybody in the United States. We've got an ambassador that's running around in Washington trying to rebuild a relationship after comments he's made before he got there, unable to secure a meeting with the President for the Prime Minister, trying to cut side deals to build some credibility. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think we should be sitting here thinking that it's a certainty that we're going to be sitting at 10%. If you don't have those sort of relationships, those sort of discussions, and you build that personal relationship, just cast your mind back to Joe Hockey's time as the ambassador in Washington. Cast your mind back to the relationship that an ambassador does actually create with an administration and what that means for our country. We have a more compelling case today, not to have 10%, but to have zero, than what we did in 2018-19 when President Trump first put tariffs in. We have a more compelling case. We've dropped 2 cheques for $1.6 billion for our first 2 instalments on our Virginia-class submarines. I would have thought that's a pretty big signal that if you got in the room to President Trump to say, we're pretty serious about this trade thing with you guys, we're pretty serious about this AUKUS thing, we're going to back the United States to help us with that. We've cut a cheque, but I would have thought that would have been the biggest golden ticket to get into the White House. Unfortunately, we've got an ambassador and a Prime Minister that can't get an audience, and the only audience we have had through the ambassador back was in January, February, and there's no detail of that meeting. Now, if there's no detail of the meeting, that tells me one thing: there's no good news to come out of it. And so we've got to be honest about this. We are playing a dangerous game with the United States. We have to be upfront and honest, but you have to be in the room, not just on trade, but on AUKUS as well. There are strategic threats to this country, and if you do not have the relationships to help us to defend ourselves, instead of having to rely on Virgin pilots, then we have some very serious questions about the diplomatic failures of Anthony Albanese and Kevin Rudd. Well, I think you've missed the point. I have no problems in allowing US beef to come into this country. In fact, I have no issues with the US beef that comes into this country at the moment that originated, that was born and bred in the United States. What I have issue is that the science didn't extend that agreement to beef that originated in South American countries because there is a greater risk. So trade is not just on a deal, it's also predicated on science. So the issue, the point here is not contradictory. It's quite clear. This is a failure of science and due process. And when this isn't politicians saying this, this is someone independent, the Inspector General of Biosecurity, who oversees all our biosecurity in this country, has said that there should be a scientific advisory group overview these decisions. So there's nothing contradictory. This is plain science. Now, if the science says that the protocols have been put in place, the process is all fine, I have no issues with it. I have every confidence in Australian beef producers being able to compete. We already do. What I have issues about is more about the human health side of it rather than the trade side of it. That is a primary responsibility of every Australian government in terms of trade, is to keep its people safe through the proper science and biosecurity controls. I have no confidence that process has been done properly, or that we could have confidence that the protocols being put in place will protect us.
David, more broadly, obviously today marks the end of the first sitting fortnight. Do you think your party's been productive in terms of getting your issues across?
I think we have. I mean, this place is about democracy. This is the voice of the Australian people being portrayed right here. I think it's a great thing that we have members of Parliament, both in the Senate and in the House of Reps, that can come and bring forward private members' bills that are important to their constituent, important to this country. We should never try and subvert that process. I think it's healthy for our democracy. And what you always get out of the Nationals is honesty. Now, obviously we've got some of our members that want to escalate and advance net zero quicker than what the majority of the party room is, but there's a process. We're not kicking that down the road too long. We'll have our position out in the next couple of months. I'm pretty comfortable with that process, but you'll be sure to know our position. And as we proved after the election, if we believe in something as Nationals, we'll stand by it. We'll have the courage of our convictions. But as the leader, I've got to be able to lead the entire team to get to that position. And that's the process that we put in place. But I will never knock anybody from bringing forward private members' bills. I think that would subvert our democratic principles and what this place is all about. I think what sadly happens here is that once you join the Labor team, you can't have a voice outside it. If you do, just ask Senator Payman. Where's she now? She had a different point of view. That doesn't happen in the National Party. We celebrate diversity. We actually live by it, and you can have a different opinion. But I'm pretty confident that our room, through the right processes, will get to the right position, whether it be on net zero or any other issue that's going to be ahead of us in the next term.
Mr. Littleproud, you said this deal smell. If you just smell you've got to get used to for the next 3 years, what have you got to change to get the Nationals or the Coalition's interest involved with the government?
Well, don't underestimate your role in this. The Fourth Estate plays a very big role in making sure that our democratic processes, when they are subverted in terms of deals on important issues like biosecurity, have been ignored, that this message is just as important for the media and the role that you play. I think the media plays just a significant role in our democratic process. And I hope that mainstream media gets more support in that rather than online and social media, where there isn't the oversight and the thoroughness, not always on my side, but the thoroughness that we should always go through. So we've been dealt a hand that we've got to accept, but that's why we would have thought that the parliamentary processes that were put in place were reasonable ones around asking those decision makers to come before the Senate and explain the scientific reasons. We'll obviously be taking this to estimates, but when you're talking about a decision of human health, why should we wait till October? Why would the Greens think that, oh, well, we could just wait till October when, put all the agricultural aspects aside, this is a human health issue. And this is frightening that a government would do that without the right transparency and understanding, when their own Inspector General said this is just good governance to do it. It's the precautionary principle that we should stick to, and the fact that they've ignored that speaks volumes about what the Greens and Labor will get up to over the next 3 years.
David, do you have concerns about YouTube being involved in the social media ban? Some of your national colleagues when the legislation first went through were arguing quite strongly for that part of that. Now the government's back on that bill.
Yeah, I personally also want to look closer at that, as I think there is some educational elements of this. But I think, to the same token, I think the social media companies have created a lot of this themselves. They have much of the technology to be able to help parents and give them the tools, more sophisticated, I think, than what we as legislators are trying to do. And I'm not knocking the legislation the government's brought in, because we'll support that more broadly. But I think the social media companies have a lot to answer for. They have an opportunity, and let's be honest, the reason they haven't done it and have been forced even into where we've got to here is because most of their users are under the age of 18, and the advertising dollars that they get that's perpetrated through it is making them billions. So let's call this out for what it is. These social media companies, whether it be YouTube or any of them, don't have a great social licence as far as I'm concerned. But what I want to make sure is that if there is an educational element and there are tools within that could provide and allow that, then why shouldn't we? But I'll look more closely at it. Personally, that was my concern as well. But I'm not closing my mind to where the government's got, and I want to look at the detail. The only briefing that we were afforded was from YouTube itself. The government hadn't provided the briefing to the Shadow Minister before the bill was introduced, so we'll work through that.
There's a contingent of North Queenslanders here today trying to get copper smelter saved, essentially. What
well, can't keep spending Australian taxpayers' money to keep businesses going. You've got to fix the fundamentals. And what we are seeing in North Queensland and what you'll see in Whyalla is the fundamentals don't stack up. Unless you've got affordable, reliable energy, you can't run a business. And all we'll be doing is we'll be subsidising this again in another 12 months, another 2 years, because their power bills keep going up. There is no country of the industrial scale the size of Australia that is running their economy on an all renewables approach. You simply can't do it. Just look at Spain and Portugal. Ask them the questions about how that's going at the moment. You need baseload power. And we're not walking away from the fact that we believe we should have a technology agnostic approach. That should include nuclear. That should also include things like coal and gas with CCS. There's no reason why you can't do that. This is the real reason why these smelters are shutting, is the energy bills are out of control and they can't afford it. And there's a human toll to this. I mean, we're in Canberra, but just think about those people in Gladstone, up in Mount Isa. That's their livelihood's gone, all because of an ideology that is just tearing this country apart. There is a day of reckoning coming, and unfortunately, they're the canary in the coal mine, for want of a better term. And unless we've got the courage to face into this, it'll be a great ideology that puts many people in capital cities to sleep in the knowledge they think they're saving the world. They're actually not. They're just destroying our country. There is a better way. There's a smarter way. There's an Australian way. And the Nationals will portray that, but buying businesses and keep propping them up, ultimately that has to come to an end because your money runs out.
Smelters around the world are struggling with trying to compete with overcapacity operating sorts of things. Does the government not have a role to help through that market? If it's affordable enough to then just electricity?
Well, the first thing you want to do is make sure that before you go and spend Australian taxpayers' money, you've got all the fundamentals right. And that is the biggest impediment in terms of competitiveness is around wages and around energy. Now, wages, there's no government in Australia that want to diminish the living standards of its people. But one of the things you do have a lever to pull is on energy and the cost of energy. That's where you've got to have the fundamentals right. If you don't have the courage to do that, well, yes, there may be a point where there needs to be support. But until you fix the fundamentals, you're just going to spend money after money after money, and ultimately that runs out. And it's running out here now. Treasury's already telling us that we're going to have to increase our taxes to keep this economy going. But you can pull the levers without costing the Australian taxpayer anything if we're smart about it. And that's without even talking about the capacity investment scheme that's just been lifted another 25%. At what cost? I mean, Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese were very quick to talk about our energy grid. I just challenge you all. Ask them the question about what is the ISP cost that they are taking to the Australian people in an all renewables approach. They were very quick. We put Frontier Economics report out that said ours was $331 billion. That's with 38% nuclear, 54% renewables and the balance gas and hydro, 331 billion. Theirs, even Frontier Economics said at best was probably 600 billion, going up beyond that. So the reality is the question needs to be asked of the government. What is their total cost of energy? Because until you fix that, you're going to keep subsidising smelters, you're going to keep subsidising a whole lot of manufacturing in this country to keep it going. And there is a human toll to that, no matter where it is. It's not just in those areas because it just keeps compounding. Well, that's up to what happens with Hamas. I mean, let's just get back to first principles. Well, the Israeli government is different to the Australian government. We're our own sovereign government here. We'll make our own decisions. But let's get back to first principles. The reality is that there was a terrorist attack perpetrated on the Israeli people on the 7th of October, 2023. The Israeli government has a responsibility, as the Australian government would have, to hunt those perpetrators down and to eliminate that threat. Full stop. And there is precedent here in Australia. When there was hate perpetrated on Australians in Bali, the coalition government in that era hunted them down in Indonesia and made sure that they were brought to account. Now, I think the Israeli government has every right and every responsibility, particularly when they still have 20 odd hostages that haven't been returned. But when you have a threat, a clear and present danger to the people that you represent, you have a responsibility to eliminate that threat. So the reality is until Hamas is destroyed, who are we dealing with? Who are we dealing with? We're dealing with Hamas. I don't think you want to have representatives of Hamas perched up here in an embassy on behalf. Well, but there is no. I mean, I haven't been there on the ground because it's not a really safe place. But I tend to think that we're kidding ourselves if we don't think that Hamas is running the show in there at the moment. That they have used tactics of putting innocent children and women in front of them as human shields. Now, until that sort of hate is eliminated, if I was living in that region, I think, and I was in government, my responsibility would be to eliminate that threat, so that I can give confidence to the people I represent. That is my responsibility here in Australia. We've lived by that principle. I think Israel has every right to live by that principle, because we talk about the children. Well, I'm a father too, and I hate seeing what's happened to those children that have been on the screen. But I also, as a father, would hate to think that if on the 7th of October someone came into Australia and did what they did in Israel to my kids, I'd have a fair bit to say about the government not going and eliminating that threat so that it never happened again. It is a fluid situation, it's a complex situation that's been going on for years. But the one thing that has always proven is that unless you cut the head off Hamas and they are gone, we are going to go back to this again. This is unfortunately a no-win situation for anybody. And I just got to say, but every government has a responsibility to protect its people.
Do you believe there's widespread hunger and starvation in Gaza?
Well, I'm seeing the reports, and it can only take them on face value. So I take them, but some of that is not necessarily the result of Israel in entirety. The reality is that they are also part of the issue and getting aid to many of those people. And you only have to look at their form. I mean, when they were full-on fighting and had numbers, they were sitting in hospitals and schools, using people as human shields. That is their business model. Now, I don't think we need to come from this moral high ground from one side or the other. This is a bad situation. There is no winners. But you've got to get back to first principles here. Israelis deserve to live safely and not have the threat of someone coming across their borders in an act of absolute terror that we seem to forget about. This wasn't initiated by the Israeli people. This was initiated by a terrorist organisation. And the best thing that can happen is that we remove and eliminate that terrorist organisation so that there can be a Palestinian state one day. But until that's eliminated, until that's removed, I don't think any Australian would want to live next to that, in the knowledge that that potentially could relive what happened on the 7th of October. We didn't live through that. And whatever we are seeing horrific images right across the Middle East there at the moment. I get that. But do you really want to think that you could relive the 7th of October again? I don't think anyone knowingly would want to do that. Thanks, guys.
You can trust. Sorry?